Thank you. Hi, my name is Rina. I'm working on a project related to try to create a game that is have to be the end of the stories have to be learning for the kids. Basically, we want to create something fun, but also make the kid to understand some features like math and stuff like that. So I'm asking you, or if you have any kind of tip, or you have from your experience, because maybe I'm a gamer, I love video games, but it's different to have something that is fun, to be recreation or about that story or everything, but it's different when you're learning something. And I realized when I made the research, there are a lot of video games that are related to education that are very boring. So we don't want to be that.
Yes, all of, is this on? Is this on? So,
yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yes, most of those games are terrible. Almost all of them are terrible. And the reason, I'll move out of the way of that. The reason that they're terrible is that they start with the same idea that you actually started the question with, which is, I want to make a game that's about learning, but also is fun. And there's an idea in there that very few people question, which is that learning isn't fun, right? Actually, human beings love to learn, right? We love to see new things. We love to explore. If all animals do, if you've ever seen dogs play, they instinctually know how to play. They're having a great time, and they're learning to fight, right? The problem is that we have made learning boring, right, by structuring it in the way that we do. And maybe for a long time we had no choice, because our best technology was long books with a lot of facts and having people memorize those. And I'm not being down on that, because that has been very useful. The reason I can hold an electronic microphone and speak to you today is because of that. However, I think that video games can be very, very exciting and useful in learning, but they have to do it in a different way. You don't do it by copying textbooks that are boring and then you have to have great feats of concentration to sit in front of in the first place. Because if you do that and then try to make it fun, it'll never be fun. So the way it has to be done is to decide that you're going to communicate a different thing, right? With books, let's take math for example, right? The way learning works in books is that you start out with facts, like you learn the fundamental theorem of calculus or something, right? And you start playing with that. And after solving a lot of problems, right, you start to see patterns. And after a great deal of exercises, you start to build an intuition for how calculus behaves. For example, for how the area under a curve changes. And maybe the faster you can visualize those things, the faster you learn. I think, of course I haven't tried this yet, but my belief is that video games are much better at communicating intuition and very poor at communicating facts. Books are great for facts because it's printed, it's never going to change, you can scan it very quickly, right? A video game is about behavior and intuition. So I think the value of games is to try to communicate the intuition and not the facts. To create a space where people can play and do what they want within these concepts and build intuition. And then they use the books for the facts. And I think that the learning through the books will work a lot faster if some of the intuition is already there. But I've never seen anybody who approaches the problem in this way. So if you would like to do that, good luck.
I think so.
We'll do it back here.
Yes, in your opinion, following this question, it's more important the mechanic of the game or the story?
You can have a game without a story. You can't have a game without a mechanic.
How do you some games are more about the mechanic and the story is really little. And some games are story and the mechanic is bored some way. So how do you balance both?
You know, I'm really not the right person to ask because I'm not very interested in game stories. There are people who are. They have all kinds of theories about how you make stories in games good, but I've never seen it. I've never seen a video game story that to me was even a tenth as good as my favorite book or as my favorite film. If people start to do that, if those people who like story in games can start to create things that will compete with those other media, then I'll pay stronger attention. But until that time, I personally, as a designer, am focused on behavior, on nonverbal communication, and on exploring possibility. I don't even like to say mechanics because it's not a good word. It doesn't really describe what's really going on.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
So
It's not exactly a question, so I don't know.
Go for it.
Well, it's about what you were saying in respect to education. It's that, for example, when I see what you're doing with witness or thinking what you do already do with brain, it's not just that the player learns something like fact or truth, but a way to see the world and learn new things about the world. It's like changing the way. If you teach math to a kid learns math. But if you teach how to learn math, he can learn math and other stuff too. It's like the problem with the conventional education that teach something that doesn't teach to learn things about the world. I see that your games go that way. When I played right, I was like not just wondering about the puzzles in Braille, but in my living, in my user living, thinking alternatively. And
I have nothing to add to that. I mean, that's great.
So following on that,
I've lost track. Okay. We've got 2 mics, so.
good thing.
All right.
Following on what he said, that's what you're looking for as a designer. To have the player project themselves and start thinking about their lives while they're in the flow of the game, right? Or would that be one of your goals?
Some people design games that way. That's not really what I do. I stop before the player, and I don't try to predict too much what the player's response is going to be. I know what my response is going to be, and I maybe know what an ideal player will think when they see this, but for me, it's important to give people this freedom to respond however. Like, when I go to the movies and I see some Hollywood movie where they've tried very hard to make me feel a certain thing by putting in the music and all, and I do sometimes, and when that happens, I feel angry. I'm angry at the people who made the film, right? So I don't try to do that, but I do try to make things that have a lot of opportunity for people to have a very rich response, whatever that will be. It's hard to explain. It's a little bit more hands-off than what you might think.
Basically, what you're saying is you're not trying to empathize through music or sound, or aesthetics, because you as a person don't like that. Like when you go to the movies, you don't like the action part. Like, and then the music comes on and you're like, yeah, or something like that.
There is. I mean,
Okay.
I do carefully use things like music and sound when I can, but it's not to manipulate the audience. It's to give the audience a presentation of things that are well composed, and they can have whatever reaction they will have to that. And in fact, if it's very, very interesting, some of the most interesting things in the history of humanity, people did not agree upon, right? Half people would love it and half people would hate it, or whatever, right? And so if you're trying to make something that everybody will love, or everybody will feel sad during this scene in the story or something, then maybe you're not in that level of the most interesting things humanity has ever seen. I don't know. It's difficult.
We're basically trying to do a subtle design, not try and overdo it. Very subtly, and if it works for most people, but for everyone, we basically design that not so much emphasis on the player, not so much emphasis on forcing the experience in that.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to dig myself in a hole. Okay,
I can work with that.
last question.
I'm not a game designer, I'm a game player, so please bear with me, I want to become a better player. You said a game designer is an explorer or a reporter, so in a sense a game designer is a witness. So I thought you talked about the designer's commitment to the truth. Does the player, in your mind, have to commit to the truth also?
Definitely, there is, for certain kinds of games, right? Especially the kind that Mark and I are talking about here. Because it's not always true that the designer is an explorer, right? If you're the designer of Grand Theft Auto 4 or 5 or something, you're probably not exploring very much, right? But for some types of games, people have the freedom to do this. And when we put together, here's what I found, here's a package that I'm giving to you, the player, then that is sort of an invitation to the player to follow along in the footsteps, right? But again, not a forcible one. We don't want to require that they think the same thing of these things. But it's like, let's put some trail markers on this trail that goes through the mountains. But you could go that way if you wanted. You could go this way and just think that this viewpoint that I marked is not that good of a view. But we will at least mark what we found. And yes, so there is an invitation for the player to go. The way that I learned game design was just by playing games, right? There's no, that's the only way that you can learn game design right now. There are books that will claim to teach game design, and they're all terrible. They all make you stupid if you read them, so don't read them. I've never seen one that was good, so there may exist one. So the only way to do it is to approach games with that kind of eye, and maybe the games were built for that, maybe they were not, right? But you can always, if you're looking, you can always find things. I mean, you can learn about game design from picking up this bottle, you know, if you think about it hard enough. So that's it, right?
Yeah. I go to cheat and ask you a question.
Okay, before you do that, I have one more slide. Yes, there's I can't read it, but there's an extended version of this talk on the Indicate website, and you can copy down the URL anyone who's interested. It goes through all the points and more examples. So the question is,
my question is, you mentioned all these virtues and things. What do you think are the requirements for somebody to be able to make a game using those?
The requirements for what? For a person or a team to be able to make a game using those virtues. What do you think they need?
this is a loaded question.
Yeah.
You're asking me this already knowing the answer. What you need is freedom, right? Because a lot of the time, people who are paying you to design will not give you this freedom to make these kind of choices. And that's a problem. And the only solution that I know to that problem is to quit and go and have freedom. It's true. So, right now, is still the best possible time to be an independent game developer. It's very easy to make something, to get it to players on the PC, if it's a Flash game, or on Steam, or on the iPhone or Android or Facebook, or wherever. There's so many possibilities now. It's so easy. When I started in games, it was 1996 when I started my first company. The only way to get a game to people was to put it in a box in the store, and somebody would sign a rotten deal and take all your money, and it was terrible. So things are amazingly better now. So, if you don't do what you want to do now, when are you going to do it? Because this good situation might go away. Anytime there's a good situation, it's often followed by a bad situation. So I encourage people to take advantage of it while they have it. Thanks very much.